Hello and welcome. Some more of your questions, to which I'll give my comments. And continuing with that, at the beginning of this week, which is leading up to the weekend of Asala Puja, this is the third of these three main Buddhist holidays: Magha Puja, Vaisakha Puja, and then Asala Puja, known as Buddha Day, Dharma Day, Sangha Day. This is Dharma Day, coming up. The day of the full moon of July, when also the Vasa begins, the monsoon season traditionally in India, and the time when monks stay in one location for that period, 3 months. That coming up, I will be giving some more Dharma talks. I just wanted on this occasion to finish off with some of the comments and questions I've received, so they don't get too out of date. And to continue with that, I did say, rashly, that I'd be giving the Dharma talk of all Dharma talks to end Dharma talks. Well, tomorrow it could well be that, because if you're able to listen to it by whatever means, subscribe, notify, make sure you see this somehow, I will be pointing or discussing with you, pointing us all in the right direction, hopefully, as to how we can practice in the way the Buddha described on this very special occasion coming up this weekend. This Asala Puja, the full moon of July, is actually on the Sunday, the actual full moon, but celebrated, I think, in many places, including here, Thailand and Sri Lanka, here, on the Saturday the 21st, or the Saturday the 20th of July, but I think in some places it's also on the Sunday the 20th. However, it doesn't matter too much specifically, unless you're a monk entering the Vasa. It's a weekend thing, coincidentally, and a national holiday anyway, a Poya Day, full moon here in Sri Lanka. I hope you'll find that talk very interesting, but also very straightforward and to the point, and maybe slightly different. That's coming up soon. On that note, someone did comment, what would the Buddha say about all this? He didn't say that in the exact words, but I don't have the question in front of me. But his comment was relating to what would the Buddha think of YouTube videos. I then did see later on another comment from the same subscriber or viewer, that a statement or a comment, making YouTube videos or something like that, with an exclamation mark. Okay, well, what would the Buddha have said about his disciples, his monks, giving Dharma talks? What would the Buddha have said about even lay people talking about the Dharma in public forums, real people in marketplaces or in anywhere where more than 1 or 2 or 3 or even 100 or 1,000 people could gather? The Buddha would gather together telepathically 1,000 monks in one place at one time to talk to them. Now these days, without that benefit of being a Buddha and telepathy, we can talk to sometimes, or a chipmunk, that many people in one go to share the Dharma. And I think the Buddha would appreciate that this is the modern way that is done. When books came along, that was the modern way. Then when recording on audio tape came along, that was the way. In the time of the lineage of Ajahn Chah's Thai Forest tradition from Thailand, he would be, as well as Longtar Mahaboa, one of his sort of a parallel lineage that was growing up in that time with the revival of the forest tradition in Thailand. He was also recording many audio tapes of his, or they were being recorded audio tapes of their talks. I personally don't make these videos. I just sit in front of the phone and talk like this, press a button, done. That's all there is to it, and people can or don't have to watch. It's up to them. So I think that's probably, I can't think or imagine what the Buddha would say or how he would interact with such a medium. It's irrelevant from that point of view. We can never know. But we adapt to the society we're in, and we use the means available to us to help, if we can, only out of compassion, the other people by sharing the Dharma. What the Buddha did say that we can know, and is a fact because it's in the Vinaya, is that the Dharma cannot be shared for any form of financial gain. So if you write a book on meditation based on Buddhist meditation or the teachings of the Buddha, or a Dharma book or a collection of Dharma talks, it should not be sold for profit, or even in actual fact it can't even really be sold, and they are not sold to cover their costs. Usually they are printed by the printing organization, offering that facility by way of dana, as a gift to the Sangha or to that teacher who is sharing the Dharma. And by this way also, this medium is relatively free. It costs a little bit to have a phone and some internet, but YouTube put these on for free. We can exclude advertisements, which I do, but I can't exclude them before or after, because that is not my domain. I guess they make their money that way, but this is not a commercial venture. If it was, then the Buddha has said something about that, for sure. You cannot make money out of sharing the Dharma. It would be inappropriate, and it would also it would taint the nature of what you're saying also, if it was on a commercial, if it was being taught along commercial lines. So, continuing with that, it's kind of a similar theme, isn't it? Do you think listening, well, you don't know yet, I'll say the question. Do you think listening to these videos, instead of wanting to be mindful of this moment while I'm working, is better or worse for sati? So you say instead of wanting to be mindful. I think it's just a mistranslation there or something, but being mindful, if we can, we should be mindful of all we're doing. Sati sampajana. So wisely using mindfulness about all of our daily activities of body, speech and mind, when we're working, when we're playing, socializing, and even just before we're going to sleep. From the moment we wake until the moment we sleep, employing mindfulness, sati, samasati, right mindfulness. Right mindfulness, that is our attention to detail, what's going on, but not an over-attention, analysing each and every thing we're doing. So say one's washing up and using the soap and saying, oh, it feels soapy and slippy, I like it, I don't like it, it's bubbles. It's a little bit over the top. It's just a balance, as I'll be talking about in the next talk. It's a sort of middle way, middle path, somewhere in between. Just know you're washing up. Now, if you have a job that you're doing, I, for one, as a layperson, had a job that involved just being there. No effort or thinking required. And I did. There was little to be mindful of at that point other than practicing meditation, but when not watching the breath, I did take the opportunity to listen to audio Dharma talks at the time whenever I had the opportunity. So if it fits in with your working life and it's allowable, so you're not stealing by way of using your employer's time for your own benefit, even though it's improving your skills, he might not see it, they might not see it that way. So you should only be listening to Dharma talks with their permission, with their blessing, or in your own time. Other than that, I think it's okay, but if you feel it's distracting or taking you away from the mindfulness of your activities, then you should perhaps stop listening and bring your awareness and develop your sati, to samasati, right mindfulness, to try and develop mindfulness and that skill in the activities that you are performing. Oh, someone talking about some stuff I don't even understand. Clean acid, marijuana, and I've already covered this. We don't. There are no intoxicants in Buddhism. It's the fifth precept. So whatever, other than for the alleviation of pain. So maybe medical marijuana or painkillers we call them. You know, pain. Drugs like paracetamol, or even stronger if your pain is really severe, because pain itself is an intoxicant. But I think I've just spoken about that recently, so this is another question along those lines. So this person is saying that something's daunting, that I'm saying that. So you're saying you use anapanasati, but don't use a specific sustained point of contact with the breath. And then someone reached access concentration but only once, and then there's a lot of description about this nostrils thing. Where do I focus? You're saying it's okay to feel the breath wherever I happen to feel it in that moment. Is that right? No, it's not quite what I said. So if you can keep your attention on the breath in one particular location, that's very good. That's useful, isn't it? Because you're watching the breath, it's bringing you to the body, it's keeping you in the present moment, here and now. That's the point of it. That's the idea behind that meditation object, and it's always with you. But if you struggle with that, you may have to say identifying the point of contact between external and internal. This is why the tip of the nose is used, because it's where the air is external, becomes part of you. Internally, it enters the body at that point. So it's the most commonly used reference. But when you look at the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha doesn't say this. He says being aware of the whole body of the breath. So when I refer to that, I refer to the volume of air. So like a body of water, a body of air. It's the amount of air coming in and going out. Now you are observing this. You don't have to be. When I said right mindfulness, you can get over finicky about right concentration, and I'll be expanding upon this later on in the next talk, but you can get too intense with your concentration on a point, and if it's drifting, oh, it's drifted. No, you do know you're breathing, and if you don't, just stop, and then you know you're not breathing. It's the opposite. So you know when you're breathing in, and you know when you're breathing out. All I'm doing is keeping it simple. And personally, I find trying to identify the breath coming in and going out at the tip of the nose is unnecessary and not even particularly easy. But I do know that there is a body of air of a particular temperature coming into my body and then being exhaled out of my body at a different temperature, so having a slightly different and changed nature. Obviously also deoxygenated, which you can't see or identify, so we don't need to bother with that, but we know we're breathing out. This is what I'm saying. It's in fact not what I'm saying, it's what the Buddha is saying in the Anapanasati Sutta. Okay. I also inherited, so somebody's giving me their background here, which I won't read all the background. You might find the comment if you want to read it yourself, but it's personal, and we sum it up with the end paragraph. I also inherited alcoholism. Here in the States, if something like this happens, they say it is God's will. To me, that is like saying it was the wind. My question is, was that my karma, mum's karma, dad's karma? Why do we bother with karma? I understand cause and effect in real time, but why do we discuss past lives, karma, nirvana, without having the actual experience? Okay, so maybe there's some biological, medical evidence that people can inherit an addictive nature and specific forms of that addiction. Maybe there isn't, but it makes sense genetically that we do inherit other personality aspects, positive and negative, from our parents and throughout families. So it's a significant possibility. I think it is, however, fair to say that if your father was a good carpenter, you might, if you trained those skills, be able to develop those skills further and also be a good carpenter. But you don't have to be a carpenter. Even though you have that raw ingredients there, maybe not, you could develop it and you could be so. But you may never pick up a saw, a piece of wood, and never have anything to do with carpentry. It's very much the causes and conditions you are surrounded with. So this is the nature versus nurture argument, isn't it? If you are brought up amongst drinking in a drinking environment and surrounded by that continuously, then it will be natural for you to think it's okay and do the same. If you continue then after that upbringing, going to pubs, clubs, restaurants where there's drinking, or you indeed just simply live in a country where it's very common. In fact, where I come from, it's probably more unusual not to drink than to drink. But in India, it's, well, it used to be the other way around, quite unusual and not really acceptable to drink. So it's very culturally influenced. This is nurture as opposed to nature. But there's a tendency very much for people suffering from these debilitating conditions to, rather than do something about it, to blame others. But in effect, karma is just actions. And you're saying you understand karma in the here and now, in its relativity to present time. That's all you need to understand of karma. If you stop drinking, you're no longer, I know it's popular to say I'm an alcoholic, my name is Bhante Dhammarakkhita, or I'm an alcoholic or something, your name, and you say you're an alcoholic, and then you're always that, you're a recovering alcoholic. Well, you know, I don't like to look at it that way. That's in the past. Once you're not drinking, you're no longer an alcoholic. Until you start drinking again, and then you're an alcoholic again if it's a problem. So just don't drink, keep this fifth precept, and then you're not an alcoholic. No reference ever needs to be made to it ever again. It's in the past, it's gone, it's finished with. And it's your responsibility to keep that up, not to drink again. You can't blame past karma other than the fact you've developed through your actions. This is a real thing. This isn't talking about magic or anything like that. This is a real thing. If you've developed a bodily dependency on alcohol, you're going to have to be gently and carefully, with medical supervision, withdrawn from that need, from that dependency, before you can stop drinking, after which it is entirely up to you whether you drink again or whether you don't. Personally, I stopped drinking 15 years ago and haven't bothered drinking since. I just have not had to do that, just stopped doing it. So I can't blame, even though my rest of my family still drink, and the country I come from, it's quite usual and normal, and my background is from that kind of situation. I'm away from that now, but it still goes on here and in other places, and when I travel and if I'm out in public, it's commonplace. So I'm not shielding myself from it in any way, I just choose not to do it. That is my karma, and the direct result of my karma of not doing something in action is that I am not drinking. That's the result. If I was to be, then I would no longer be a monk, because I would have broken a precept, and I would also be perhaps failing a little bit in my practice of Buddhism as a layperson by not being able to keep the 5 precepts. But as long as you're trying, your intention is to stop drinking, that's the main thing, that's the action you're putting in now. Why do we bother with it? Well, it's the fundamental fact of right view, which I will come to again in some more detail in the next talk. But karma, that we are the heirs to our karma and responsible for our karma. When we say heirs to our karma, our own not other people's, not our mothers, not our fathers. Heirs is often attributed to family inheritance, but it's in this case specifically heirs to our own karma and responsible for our karma. So that is what we've done in the past, we will inherit today, what we have done by way of vipaka. Karma is actions, vipaka is the results. And what we do now is what we're responsible for now is what will result in the future vipaka, often just always referred to as just karma in a generic sense, but really there's two words. Karma is the action, vipaka is the results, and we are the heirs to all of those actions. Does jhana exist off the cushion? I'm a practitioner of Zen Chan who hasn't had that experience. So jhana really, again, I'm going to talk about this in the next talk, but jhana really is another word. We have samadhi. We have in the Noble Eightfold Path samadhi. We also categorize the Noble Eightfold Path as sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation and panya. And samadhi we tend to is the word that is for our more formal sitting meditation. And as far as jhanas are concerned, these are deeply absorbed states. So the potential for jhana exists wherever you are, sitting, standing, walking or lying down, for anybody to experience. If you wish to experience it, you must sit and you must sit for some time in meditation and develop samadhi and deep absorbed states of meditation we call jhanas without doing anything else. Mindfulness continues to exist and is better, improved, sharpened after practicing samadhi, as is samadhi benefited from having used and practiced mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities, like two sides of the same hand. You can't have one without the other. So they're linked in that sense. But the experience of jhana is whilst you're sitting in formal meditation, not whilst you're walking along the high street or driving your car, heavens forbid, because you will be unaffected by all that's going on around you if you were, say, in the third or fourth jhana, and it would be a terrible collision course. It may be that in Zen this is, you see, Zen is another word for jhana because jhana is meditation, is samadhi, is deep absorbed meditation. It's a deep absorbed state of it's in a state of absorption coming from samadhi. And then jhana became chan in the Orient, and then that word became Zen in Japan. So Zen means jhana. So people go around these days saying, oh, hello, I'm going to really develop some Zen, or hey, look at him, he's got some Zen, or that flower pot is very Zen. You know, this is just one of those strange and amusing overuses of a word which has become misunderstood in the common vernacular, much like karma is often. If you'll excuse me a moment. Oh, the whole world's decided to stand there and talk today. I wonder why. See, meditation's similar. So, moving on. So again, this is someone welcoming me to here, to Sri Lanka. So I was just reading your very kind comments there. Thank you. Can I make a video about the hindrances? So the 5 hindrances: sensual desire, aversion, tiredness or laziness, restlessness and worry, and doubt. I'm talking about them in practically every video, either singularly or 1 or 2 of them. So I have made, I think, a video back in a while back, just specifically on those. But generally, when I'm talking, I'm employing all of these aspects of the Dharma, these lists, in the discussion, because that is the Dharma. It's real life. It's not just something we need to learn from a book and look at in a pretty list. It's something we actually put into action. Again, this is something I'll discuss a little bit more in the next talk, but I will, again, when we talk about meditation practices, techniques and objects in the near future, maybe discuss in a video in some more detail again the nature of those 5 hindrances. But these 5 hindrances don't just affect us in meditation, they affect us in everything we're doing, in all of our actions of body, speech and mind, throughout our activities, and are the obstacles towards doing things mindfully, carefully even. Why do we stub our toe walking along the road? It happens to me, not so much now, but it used to happen to me a lot. And when I first went to Thailand, I was telling someone yesterday, it was always raining. I used to go at that time of year, and they have a lot of marble floors, especially at the temples. I was forever falling over because I was putting my right foot first and my heel down first. And if you do that, you're going to be on your back, and you could break your neck or arms. Or I did dislocate my shoulder on one occasion and fell down a long flight of stairs. That was returning to the UK. But this, why does it happen? Because you were thinking of something else. You weren't being mindful. You weren't thinking wet, slippery floor. I'm addressing myself here. Put your toes down first. Gently lower your heel. Then, only then, lift your left foot. And the same. Do you think that way when you're walking? No. Your head is where you're going already, isn't it? Or, worse still, it's where you've come from. No. Your head, your thinking, your mindfulness needs to be here, now, right on the spot, if you don't want to fall over or stub your toe. So these hindrances are still there in just those day-to-day activities. And they're just sensual desire, wanting something you haven't got, or ill will, not wanting something you have got, not wanting it to be raining. You might be thinking that, then you slip over. Just accept it's raining. That's the way it is. It's the nature. It's just nature. It's not the nature of things. It is nature. It's raining. And no, it's impermanent. It will stop raining. When you know this, you have this confidence in the Buddha's teachings of an impermanence, anicca, and that things are unsatisfactory, but out of our control. This confidence gives you freedom, because you don't have to be thinking about such things, but more you can employ mindfulness on what you're doing at that moment, and then not have these accidents. So I've just spoken a little bit about these hindrances there, and I think really, even to make a long video, I couldn't say much more. It's how we use the understanding of those 5 hindrances. You've asked a question, so you know what they are. When you understand exactly what they are individually and apply them to how they affect you in your day-to-day activities, then you can apply them in reverse to what the Zen practitioner was saying, to when you sit down on your cushion, if you have one, I don't have one, but to meditate. You sit and you then see these hindrances coming up more vividly. Okay. Didn't the Buddha teach that formless states, being impermanent, did not lead to nirvana, and that attachment to them was an obstacle? So as I didn't in the last comment, I'll have to now. Nibbana is the Pali word we use for the Sanskrit word is nirvana, but also nirvana can be in other practices considered as something slightly different. And I don't know what, because I only practice one thing, and that is from the Pali canon, and the word nibbana is what I'm familiar with. But did the Buddha, or didn't the Buddha teach that the formless states, being impermanent, did not lead to nirvana, and that attachment to them was an obstacle. Well, yes, absolutely, and that is what I was saying. But you need to go through these stages of jhana to some extent to work towards nibbana. But attachment, just so liking, if you really like this feeling of piti and sukha, so rapture and happiness, when you're meditating, you could get attached to that. But it won't last. It's impermanent, as you quite rightly say. The formless states are those. So form is our physical body, which is tangibly and obviously impermanent. It gets old, it gets sick, it dies. But emotions such as rapture and happiness are less tangibly so. But we know that we're not always happy, and we also know we're not always sad. It's up and down. One time we're sad, one time we're happy, sometimes we're in between. These are ever changing. And similarly in meditation, these formless states of piti and sukha are very certainly anicca, impermanent. And you want them to be, because the next stage, or the third jhana, is away from these formless states also. So if you're attached, you're going to be a little bit not stuck, because they're going to go away anyway. But you're not going to be free to develop your absorption into your meditation object fully, away from even the enjoyment of those states. So you might have missed something in what I said, or I said something incorrectly to make you think I was saying something completely opposed to what the Buddha says, which is what I'd never intend to do. I have a question about sila. I've heard you say that when taking precepts, it's necessary not to lie. Even down to something like, do I look fat in these pants? Because it will be difficult to meditate knowing you lied. Are white lies inherently harmful to you karmically? Or would it be difficult to meditate knowing you lied because you have a model in your head that a white lie is breaking sila? So I'm going to try and simplify your question, because that's not what I said. The fourth precept is we do not lie. For whatever reason, if you do, then it does have a negative karmic effect. If that person finds out you lied, then you can see the obvious karmic effect. If they don't, it's still hanging over you that they might. This is all I was applying to how it would affect you in meditation. It's not based on some idealism. It's not based on a model. It's nothing inherently right or wrong about meditation practice. You may have broken sila right up until the minute you begin to meditate. Knowing you have broken sila is enough for you to leave that now in the past with the determination you will not break any of the 5 precepts again, or you will determine an intention not to break the precepts in the future. You can then be free to meditate without those concerns. If reparation is able and can be made, you may have had the opportunity to apologize or whatever prior. This is all I'm saying. But don't complicate it. Very long, may not seem long when I read it out there, but when I'm looking at little short questions and a lot of words on a screen, I'm not a big reader these days. I try to avoid that. Is it okay to lie? No. Is it okay to say a white lie, as you also say in the comment, with the view to not offending someone or harming someone? No, that is not okay either, because ultimately it will. You just avoid the question, walk away, or turn the question around skillfully if possible. If you cannot, tell the truth, suffer the consequences. they won't necessarily shoot the messenger, but they'll appreciate your honesty and respect you much more for being honest than offering all of these platitudes. Now, I've spent many a time amongst people whom are very full of platitudes. These, oh yes, I'll definitely be there, don't you worry about a thing, this will happen, blah, 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 blah. And through development of khanti, patience and endurance, I knew this is just the way of their culture they speak. They're not actually directly intentionally lying, it's just what they do. But even that is karmically negative, because over-promising and under-delivering, we all know, is an absolute nightmare for all concerned. We're trained in this modern day and age to under-promise and over-deliver if we want to be successful. Isn't that right? It's very much applied in the same way to this white lie dilemma. It is not a dilemma. None of the 5 precepts are grey in their interpretation. The grey area, the more detailed explanation of them, comes in the Noble Eightfold Path, where we can find all of the answers to everything. Right speech, for instance, which is a whole Dharma talk in itself. Employ those special 5 points of right speech when talking to that person about their pants, and and be mindful of the way you speak to them on that subject is enough, and you can avoid a white lie. No such thing. A lie is a lie. White, black, red, yellow, any colour in between. No grey areas. As with the other precepts, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants. Black and white. I upset a lot of people when I say that, because they say, oh, but this and that exception and this exception. No, there's no exception. I'm not saying that if you have a problem with breaking some of the precepts you can't practice. Of course you can, but you must keep reaffirming your determination to try not to break them in the future. That's all. But to try and convince yourself that it's okay, for whatever reason, justification or excuse, it will not work. Otherwise we wouldn't have the 5 precepts. They would not be there. And they wouldn't have remained there unchanged, the same, as a basis, a foundation for this practice for all these millennia that they have. The Vinaya goes into thousands and thousands of different sort of variations, but still those core precepts are there. So it covers all the circumstances that we face as monks primarily, but not excluding lay people. It's useful for them also. Okay, not guarding the senses, is that not being mindful? So I'm not sure, I might have been misheard or mispronounced something. You've got one of these numbers that if I click it would go to the place in the video, but I don't actually watch my videos, or have the inclination to go and review them later on, and I can't really remember what video it comes from or what I've said in any of them. So it's useful to always put some context. But anyway, let's just look at it. Not guarding the senses, is that not being mindful? Double negatives do get me rather confused. Right, guarding the senses is mindfulness, yes? So that is what I would have said. We're guarding what we're allowing ourselves to look at and see. Now we can't always do that, but we know if we're going to walk into a crowded bar, for instance, that people are going to be drinking, dancing, socializing. So we can guard our senses by not walking into that bar. Or if something comes up on our machine, our computer, our tablet or phone or whatever, that is inappropriate, we can scroll through it, skip through it, slide through it, turn the page, whatever. Or we can simply close our eyes. This is for seeing. And the same goes for hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And the same goes for what we think about. This is mindfully guarding what we're paying our attention to. So this is sati sampajana in a way, but it's also guarding, and yes, it is mindfulness. So I'm not sure why you say not and not. I think that may be just a double mix-up on double negatives, if that makes any sense. So the wheel of life, is that just a Tibetan image, or do you use it? I think it's a whole Mahayana thing, which the Tibetan tradition comes from a Mahayana, northern school of Buddhism background, and yes it is, and I don't. Theravada Buddhism doesn't have the wheel of life. I've been asked that before, I think. But so, in answer to your question specifically, do I use it? No. Oh, do you say that? No, yes, I don't. Oh, very long one. Why is ignorance included with greed, hatred and delusion? And then a long question. It's not. Ignorance is avijja, lobha, moha, dosa. Lobha, dosa, moha. Moha is delusion. Delusion often gets referred to as ignorance, but delusion is, or moha, delusion, moha, the third of the three kilesas. So we've got greed, hatred, delusion. You're asking, why is ignorance included? It's not. Delusion is included. Ignorance is avijja, delusion is moha. Delusion is when you have all the information, but you don't use it correctly. You don't know how. So you don't have an understanding. Ignorance is not having the information. So still, you might even get away with being ignorant, get away with doing something correctly, but you probably won't. So it's a matter of having the information is delusion, but thinking something else. So you give me a long story about a monk who thought he was enlightened, so he disrobed because he attained enough through his practice, and that was deluded. Well, it's quite a good example, but in a way it doesn't really happen, because if you were enlightened, you would have no inclination to disrobe or do anything. You'd stay in the situation you are, unless you're a lay person, where it might become necessary to ordain and become a monk in order to exist, to be fed, to be looked after and supported, and also in order to share your teachings or the Dharma with others if you were so inclined, but not if you didn't want to. It'd be entirely up to you. So delusion and ignorance are two very different things. They have two different Pali words. Avijja is ignorance. It's just not knowing, not having, never heard the Four Noble Truths, never heard of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah. Delusion is you might know the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, and Noble Eightfold Path inside out, in English, Pali, every other language under the sun, and still not know how to apply it or use it, or think even it means something entirely different to what it does. That's delusion. He is deluded. It's because he keeps, let's say, walking into a brick wall, because he thinks he can walk through walls. Even though he knows someone's told him that you can't do that, he still keeps doing it. This person, individual, is deluded. Yeah? He's not ignorant. But if he didn't know that, he clearly believed and understood that he can walk through walls. He had some, but by using a door, yeah, then he'd have the information. He's no longer ignorant. But if he has the information about the door and he doesn't use the door, he walks into the wall, then he's deluded. If he didn't know about the door, he's ignorant. I hope that makes sense. I'm tying myself up in knots here, but I think what I'm saying there is in answer to your question, because you were wondering why is it included with the other two, and then the point of your question is because are we not it's not our fault that we're ignorant or deluded. Well, indeed, we're born, all of us, born with no information. So we're all born with the same situation, and then it is as a result of causes and conditions whereby we may, as a result of those and past karma, maybe from past lives, come into contact with the Dharma. And then a light goes on. We're no longer ignorant. We have the information. But we could still be deluded. That's this third kilesa, third defilement. Okay. If the next two are very short, I might as well finish them off. I have covered that one. It was about the Buddha and YouTube. So just one more question. If you actively maintain the 5 precepts, would you be considered a Buddhist? Well, not necessarily, because I think many other religions don't kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, lie, or take intoxicants. So Islamic faiths, for instance, who believe in Allah or God, they're keeping 5 precepts, but they're not Buddhists. But in order to practice what the Buddha taught us, and therefore think of maybe yourself as a Buddhist, or be known or called a Buddhist, but this doesn't matter, it's just a word we use for convention, really, then you need to be keeping those precepts. So to practice what the Buddha taught, to follow the Noble Eightfold Path, you need to be keeping the precepts, the 5 precepts. But keeping the 5 precepts does not mean you're a Buddhist. And some Buddhists don't keep the 5 precepts, but that doesn't mean they're not trying to. So that's the other side of that. And that's all of the questions completed, obviously until I look again. But so it's never the end, it's just the beginning. But it leaves me free tomorrow to talk a little bit more just directly to you on matters of Dharma. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about, other than because of the time of year that is approaching us, it will be getting back to basics of what this practice is about and how it came about. That's the only clue I'll give you. And that's all I know until I start talking tomorrow and hear what I have to say. So until then, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.